My mama loved you so much, and she appreciated your love for her. And I'm sorry that she couldn't hang on until today.
The world stood still in 2022 when the news broke that Naomi Judd, one half of the iconic duo the Judds, was gone. And what was even more shocking was the nature of her death. But what if the headlines only scratched the surface? What really happened behind the closed doors? What secrets did Naomi carry to her grave? As shocking details began to spill, so did questions. A private farewell letter, a chilling family history, an autopsy report that left fans reeling and devastating new details about the house where Naomi Judd died. Stay with us, because what you're about to learn will change the way you see Naomi Judd forever, because it's not what you expect. Naomi Judd was more than just a country music icon. She was a survivor, a mother, and a woman who wore many crowns while hiding scars so well. Her voice, alongside her daughter Winona's, soundtracked the lives of millions. They weren't just the Judds. They were a story of love, resilience, and second chances. But behind the fame and the red carpets was a storm Naomi kept hidden from the world. Her death in 2022 didn't just spark grief. It raised tons of questions, from the timing to the silence and then the drama that came with it, as well as the emotional weight it left behind. Fans couldn't understand how someone who appeared to be standing in her moment of glory, on the brink of a Hall of Fame induction, could be privately crumbling. What went wrong? What signs were missed? And how did everything unravel so fast? In this video, we're peeling back the curtain on Naomi's final chapter, which was defined by mental health battles, family tension, and heartbreaking revelations. This isn't just about how she died. We'll be taking a ride through her life and everything she endured while trying to live. Here we see exclusive details, unseen footage, and emotional accounts from those who were there in her last days. But before we can understand her final moment, we have to look at what led her there. The rise of a country music icon. Before the world knew Naomi Judd as the glamorous, feisty, award-winning half of country music's most beloved mother-daughter duo, she was just Diana Ellen Judd from Ashland, Kentucky. A small-town girl with big dreams, a stormy past, and a baby on her hip. Naomi's early life wasn't the stuff of fairy tales. It was messy and full of heartbreaks. She had a rough childhood that was filled with tragedy, from the sudden death of her brother at just 17 from leukemia to a strained family life that taught her to be tough early on. By the time she was in her early 20s, she was a single mother with two daughters, Winona and Ashley, trying to make ends meet. She had no husband and no college degree. All she had was a dream and a determination that wouldn't quit. They moved around a lot through California, Kentucky again, and then Tennessee. Naomi worked as a waitress and a nurse. She literally took on whatever jobs came by to take care of her daughters. What she had tucked deep in her pocket was a voice that not very many people knew about. All she wanted to do was just raise her daughters. But while doing that, she had her eyes on something different. During those long, uncertain years, music became her way out. Her daughter, Winona, had deep, powerful vocals, showing she took after Naomi's love for music and performance. In no time, they actually began performing original songs, and that's how they became the Judds. And almost overnight, the world fell in love. Years went by, and they kept pushing through, but it was during the 1980s that everything changed for them. During the course of making their way through the music industry, they were signed to RCA Victor Records and did so successfully as they racked up 14 #1 hits and 5 Grammys. They acquired the kind of fame that doesn't just make one a star. They were legends in the making. Songs like Mama, He's Crazy and Love Can Build a Bridge not just climbed the charts. They had a crazy replay value that millions of homes in America just couldn't get enough of. You might ask where Ashley was while they were busy becoming famous. Well, she grew up out of the spotlight, having a rather normal life. Naomi, in her own way, didn't just set an example of what motherhood should look like under the spotlight. She was a trailblazer for women in country music. She was bold and had a magnetic aura, which she radiated in every interview and every concert she was at. But boldness, as we'd later learn, can be dangerously deceiving. In 1991, at the height of her fame, Naomi stunned fans by announcing her retirement. Now, that was a shocker. It turned out that the singer had contracted hepatitis C, which is a life-threatening blood-borne illness, during her time working as a nurse. The diagnosis forced her off the stage, but not out of the hearts of her fans. This brought the Judds' career as a duo to an end, as Winona launched her solo career almost immediately and went on to do well with her debut solo album, Winona, being a smash hit as it topped the Billboard Country Albums chart and went multi-platinum. Over the years, she and Winona reunited for tours and TV appearances, but something was changing in Naomi. You couldn't quite see it in the headlines, but it was there because while the lights on stage were still bright, something much darker was quietly taking root behind them. And what started as just shadows would soon turn into something impossible to ignore. Naomi's personal struggles. When Naomi Judd stepped out of the spotlight in 1991, most fans assumed it was the end of her career. What the world didn't see, and what Naomi herself kept hidden for years, was that her greatest battle wasn't with hepatitis C, it was with her own mind. It started quietly in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Naomi began feeling the weight of something she couldn't place. At first, it was anxiety, and then the panic attacks came. Not just that, it became hard for her to get out of bed as it felt like she was dragging herself through wet concrete. What she once thought was exhaustion from years of performing turned out to be a deep, persistent, treatment-resistant depression. By the time she finally spoke openly about it, the truth hit everyone so hard. Naomi wasn't just battling a little sadness. She had been diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, panic disorder, and bipolar disorder. And these weren't mild cases. This was the kind of mental illness that wraps its fingers tightly without letting go so easily. And it's also the kind that doesn't always respond to help. In her 2016 memoir, River of Time, My Descent into Depression, and How I Emerged with Hope, Naomi stripped away the glamour and spoke plainly about the darkness. She wrote, "I would come home and not leave the house for weeks. I was completely immobilized and didn't know how to ask for help. Some days, she couldn't even leave her bedroom. On other days, she'd smile for interviews, only to collapse in tears the moment the cameras stopped rolling. She was prescribed a cocktail of medications ranging from antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills down to mood stabilizers, but they all just worked for a short period. She even sought therapy, but it was a revolving door. And when outpatient treatment wasn't enough, Naomi checked herself into psychiatric hospitals, desperate for a break from the thoughts that never stopped chasing her. The decades of her pushing through pain, public scrutiny, unresolved trauma from her childhood, and even the pressure of being Naomi Judd began weighing on her. And from there, she isolated herself from everyone and became distant even from the two people she loved most, Winona and Ashley. Despite being a tight-knit family in the eyes of the public, behind the scenes, they were going through misunderstandings and miscommunications that pushed them farther from themselves. One particular problem that brewed was the fact that Ashley always felt left out, calling herself the forgotten Judd. She also spoke openly about growing up in what she described as a chaotic, unstable environment, bouncing between relatives, boarding schools, and periods of emotional neglect, not out of malice, but because Naomi was chasing a dream and battling her own inner struggles at the same time. Unlike the rest of the family, Ashley had to live a more ordinary life, as she later attended the University of Kentucky, where she studied French, anthropology, and women's studies before heading to Los Angeles to become an actress. She felt fulfilled as she finally found her own path. She eventually carved out her own powerful identity in Hollywood, separate from the country music fame her mom and sister had built. So, while Naomi and Winona were traveling the country in tour buses and collecting Grammys, Ashley watched from a painful distance, dealing with the aftershocks of family fame, and had to find her own path to healing, all of which she's detailed in her memoir, All That Is Bitter and Sweet. With all the family issues that had transpired and Naomi's personal battles, she felt alone in a room full of people, and that loneliness only fueled the cycle. Her physical health also wasn't in good shape. Though she had gone into remission from hepatitis C, the toll it took on her immune system, her energy, and her self-esteem lingered. She suffered chronic pain, fatigue, and brain fog, and they all fed the storm inside her. She once described the sensation of depression as living in a dark tunnel where the end never comes. Naomi tried everything from clinical treatments to alternative therapies, all of which she journaled. Through it all, she had a sense of gratitude. There were good weeks and sometimes even good months. She'd go on walks, attend events, and have plans she met up with. But the shadow always seemed to return, just when things started to feel okay. Still, she kept trying. That was her pattern: crash, recover, rebuild, rinse and repeat. What made it even harder was the stigma. As a celebrity and a country music icon, people expected her to always pull through in perfect shape and sparkles. There wasn't much space in that world for her to show any form of weakness, and so because of that, Naomi wore a smile, even when it hurt. She sang the songs even when her heart was breaking. And every time someone called her inspirational, she quietly wrestled with the fact that she didn't always want to keep going. But she did. For years, she did, until she couldn't anymore. April 30th, 2022. Naomi Judd had spent her life surviving battles the world never saw. Some were fought on big stages, dressed in sequins and lit by stadium lights. Others were quiet, invisible, and relentless. But by the spring of 2022, she had grown tired, not of living exactly, but of hurting. And on one normal sunny morning in late April, something inside of her finally gave out. It was April 30th, 2022, a Saturday. The Judds were just one day away from being inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, which was a moment that should have been a celebration of everything Naomi had built with Winona, everything she had overcome. But even honors as big as that couldn't reach deep enough to heal what had broken inside her. Naomi was at home that day in her secluded property in Leipers Fork, Tennessee, about 40 minutes southwest of Nashville. The house, tucked away among trees, was everything Naomi had wanted. A little peace and quiet, with plenty of space. But that quietness had become a double-edged sword for her. It gave her privacy, but it also gave her too much time alone with her thoughts. Ashley, her younger daughter, had come over that morning, as she often did. Despite their past struggles, the bond between Naomi and Ashley had grown stronger as the years went by. Ashley knew her mother's moods, so she'd learned how to read the silence and how to watch for any strange signs. But that morning, something felt off. Naomi wasn't exactly in a chatty mood, and she wasn't radiant or sharp like she sometimes could be, even on the harder days. Ashley later described her as unusually quiet and withdrawn. That kind of emotional distance wasn't new, but that day, it carried a sort of heaviness. It was different, but it was hard to identify it. Ashley had also pointed out that Naomi was uncomfortable in her body as she would pace around the kitchen and say things like, she didn't want to be here anymore. After a while, Naomi calmed down and talked to her daughter about the reasons she chose and fought to stay alive despite all that she had been through. One of the things she said to Ashley was, "You don't have to worry about me, Mom. I'm okay. I'm okay." At one point, Naomi turned to her daughter and quietly asked, "Will you stay with me?" Ashley stayed close, and they talked a little before Naomi decided to head up to her bedroom. Then, just for a moment, Ashley left the room after hearing a knock. She went upstairs to answer the door to let her mother know a close family friend had come by to visit. It wasn't more than a few minutes. She wasn't even far, but when she came back down, she discovered the worst horror of her life. She found her mother collapsed on the floor. Naomi had shot herself with a firearm. In that instant, everything turned upside down. Ashley rushed to her mother's side, who was lying almost lifeless, and called 911 with her voice shaking. Reports later confirmed that Naomi was still barely alive when Ashley found her. Ashley did what she could to keep her alive. She held her, tried to comfort her, and stayed present for almost 30 minutes, even as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Ashley spoke to her mother, saying, "It's okay, it's okay. I've seen how much you've been suffering." She also revealed that they took long breaths together, and she talked to her mother and told her how much she loved her, and it was okay to go. The trauma of that moment didn't end with that morning. Ashley has since said plainly and painfully, "I was the one who discovered her. I have both grief and trauma." Paramedics and police arrived soon after, but it was too late. Naomi Judd was gone. The iconic country singer had passed away at age 76. The cause of death was later confirmed as a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. There was a farewell letter, handwritten and left nearby. The contents were never made fully public, but family sources revealed it was consistent with someone who had been in deep, unrelenting pain. She wasn't just a woman who had sad days or had bad days. She suffered a kind of pain that swallowed people whole, and she had carried it for years. The world saw the red hair, the bright smile, and the spotlight. But behind all of that was a woman battling darkness the world couldn't see. After her unfortunate death, the truth about her death had to be revealed one way or another to her fans and the public, at least to bring closure to those who had loved and adored her. So an autopsy was carried out, and the report was just exactly what Ashley had told everyone. Naomi Judd had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That alone was enough to bring the long-needed closure to the country music world and the world at large. But the findings went deeper. The toxicology report confirmed the presence of several prescription medications in her system, medicines commonly used to treat post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar disorder. This wasn't new to her family. They had walked beside her through it all, from doctor visits, therapy, and medications to hospital stays. But to the public, they were news that not many people knew and understood deeply. Even when Naomi was alive, she talked about mental illnesses and tried to raise awareness about them. The presence of those medications didn't mean she wasn't trying. In fact, it showed the opposite. Naomi had been fighting through it all to survive. But some battles are just heavier than others. The aftermath and public reaction. The days that followed were filled with confusion for fans. How could someone so successful, so celebrated, so close to receiving a career-crowning honor, be in such agony? But those who knew Naomi and those who had read her memoirs weren't as surprised. They knew this wasn't about one bad day. They understood that her action was the result of decades of struggle. Ashley later spoke out, not just to share her heartbreak, but to educate others about mental illness, about trauma, and about the compassion that's needed when someone is suffering in silence. She talked about that moment in the house when she saw her mother give up the ghost in her arms. She didn't reveal such vulnerable emotions just for headlines, but because it mattered. Even with the world crashing down around them, the show didn't stop. Literally. Just one day after Naomi Judd's tragic passing, Winona and Ashley attended the Country Music Hall of Fame ceremony as scheduled, where Naomi was posthumously inducted alongside her daughter, Winona, as part of the Judds, one of country music's most iconic duos. And yet, there they were, Winona and Ashley standing on that stage, dressed in black, their eyes puffy with grief, their voices shaking but steady. Ashley addressed the audience, saying, "Today we sisters experienced a tragedy. We lost our beautiful mother to the disease of mental illness." She spoke candidly about the pain of losing their mother and the importance of recognizing mental illness as a serious issue that shouldn't be taken for granted. Winona, tearful yet composed, expressed her heartbreak and gratitude, saying, "Though my heart is broken, I will continue to sing." She made a promise to carry on her mother's legacy through music, a vow that resonated deeply with fans and attendees alike. Both sisters went on to recite Psalm 23 to close off their speech. But the thing that cut the deepest wasn't just the grief. It was the timing. Naomi had held on for decades through the fame, the darkness, and the battles with depression, and the day before the world was set to honor her, that's when she left. In the days that followed, both sisters continued to advocate for mental health awareness, sharing their experiences and encouraging others to seek help. But just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, life threw another blow, one that no one saw coming. The challenges faced after Naomi's passing. After Naomi's death, the police were called to the scene, as is standard with any sudden or unexplained death. What the family didn't know, what no one thought to warn them about, was that every moment, every word, every breath spoken in those raw, grief-drenched minutes was being recorded. The officers, doing their job, documented everything from Ashley's emotional state, her interactions, and her attempt to hold herself together as her world shattered. All of it was logged. But here's where things turned sideways. Those recordings weren't just filed away. No, they were now part of the public record, meaning anyone on the media, the internet, and even total strangers could access them. And that's exactly what happened. When Ashley found out, she broke down, and not in a way that you'd think. She went into full-body shock, active trauma response, and acute distress all at once. She wasn't just a daughter in mourning anymore. She felt like she was being watched, dissected, and judged by people who had no business inserting themselves into her pain. The world now had access to one of the most vulnerable moments of her life, the moment she lost her mom. She described it later as being ripped open again. She had been trying to stay strong, to hold the family together while going through her own grief. But this was different. This was a complete violation of her privacy and vulnerability. Her private trauma had been turned into public entertainment. That was when she and her family decided to take matters into their own hands legally. The Judd family, who were already deep in mourning, had to pivot into fight mode. All they wanted to do was to grieve in peace. They filed a lawsuit to block the release of those police interviews, including the recordings and any photographs taken at the scene. Some things are just too sacred to be shared. And the moments immediately following the loss of a loved one? That should never be for public consumption. But what they didn't realize was that taking the videos and recordings off the public wouldn't be as easy as they had imagined, because Tennessee laws were not exactly on their side. According to the public records laws in the state, anyone is entitled to access a lot more than people realize. So while the Judds were pleading for compassion and privacy, the legal system was asking questions about transparency and freedom of information. And that's where things got murky. While the family wanted to get justice to protect their privacy, the media saw an opportunity to make headlines. They circled like sharks, hungry for updates, eager to see whether grief would win over public interest. At one point, the family wasn't even sure if they could keep the details of Naomi's final moments protected. After the final hearing on September 8th of that same year, the family's lawsuit was dismissed after some media houses withdrew their request for Naomi's photos on the day of her passing. Just when you think the story couldn't get any more heartbreaking, more layers begin to unfold. Remember the farewell letter Naomi left behind? While most of the contents remained mostly private, what slipped through the cracks was enough to leave everyone stunned. One of the most shocking details was Naomi's request that Winona not attend her funeral. Now, that was a shocker. This left fans and family alike grappling with confusion and grief. How did Winona take that? We might not know, but what we do know is that it would have broken her heart. How do you mourn your mother when her final words strictly forbid you from being at her funeral? Behind the scenes, the family was breaking in very different ways. Larry Strickland, Naomi's husband of over 3 decades, spoke through tears about her final days. He remembered her quietness. He described it as a faraway look in her eyes that didn't feel like her. And still, he never saw it coming. Ashley and Winona, though sisters, handled the tragedy differently. Ashley leaned more into advocacy, transparency, and speaking out about mental illness and what it took from them. Winona, on the other hand, grieved in motion as she continued singing, touring, basically holding tightly to the only thing that made sense anymore: music. And that wasn't all that was revealed. Hidden within probate court filings and later confirmed publicly was that Naomi had once fired a gun at Larry during a fight over infidelity. Yes, really. This just went on to show that Naomi, in her own right, was just as human as can be. Even though her life was cut short, her voice touched many and cannot be forgotten in a hurry. Her legacy and advocacy. Naomi Judd was America's heart, not only because she sang, but also because she carved out a legacy that refused to be boxed in by the fame, the charts, or even the tragedies she faced while she was alive. Long before her final days made headlines, Naomi had already become a force. Not only was she much older than her peers in country music, but she also took her daughter along with her, allowing Winona to blossom into the successful musical icon she is today, especially in a genre that often left women in the background. Naomi stepped up, took center stage, and paved the way for the next generation of female country stars who now stand proudly on the foundation she helped build. But perhaps her most powerful act came behind the cameras and off stage. In a society that often demands silence around mental health, Naomi did the opposite. She spoke up, wrote about it, and stood in front of cameras, in interviews, and on stages, and peeled back the curtain on her long battle with depression and anxiety. And best believe, she didn't do all that just to get pity or attention. She wanted to create a safe space for others, even though that space wasn't enough for her. Her willingness to be vulnerable gave people a chance to do the same. After Naomi's death, Winona could have stopped singing, or she stepped away from the spotlight and disappeared into grief. But instead, she did the one thing her mom would have wanted, which is to keep going. She went on tour in Naomi's honor, singing the songs they once sang together, standing under those stage lights alone. Ashley, ever the advocate, continued the fight her mom once championed. She's been vocal about mental health policy, education, and support. The sisters have backed campaigns and initiatives in Naomi's memory, working with foundations to raise awareness and funding for those suffering silently, just as their mother once did. And it wasn't just family carrying her name forward. After the news broke, tributes poured in like a river. Reba McEntire called her one of the strongest women I ever knew. Dolly Parton said, "She sang like an angel and loved like a warrior." Artists across genres, from Casey Musgraves to Carrie Underwood, also shared how Naomi's music shaped their childhoods and inspired their journeys. Naomi Judd's story is sad and heavy, but it's also full of light. Because her life didn't end the night she died. It continued in every song that still plays on the radio, in every fan who holds her lyrics close, and in every person now unafraid to speak their truth because she spoke hers first. Which of her songs do you still listen to this day? Let us know in the comments. Do well to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on our channel so you never miss any of our uploads. Click on the next video on your screen to watch more videos like this one.